I get a special feeling when touring a church, cathedral, mosque, or synagogue. As a photographer of architecture, cathedrals have a special appeal because of the grandeur and ageless style. Here are just a few of the churches, cathedrals, mosques, and synagogues I have visited. The interiors are just as beautiful as the outsides. Brynhathen Cathedral is the episcopal seat of the General Church of the New Jerusalem, a denomination of Swedenborgianism. The main building is of the early Gothic style, while the adjoining structures are of a transitional period reflective of a combination of both Gothic and Norman styles. The exterior appearance of the cathedral itself is reminiscent of Gloucester Cathedral in England. The cathedral is located in Brynhathen, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, just outside the city of Philadelphia. Brynhathen is also the site of the General Church-affiliated Academy of the New Church, which publishes Swedenborgian literature and is the parent organization of a high school, a four-year college, a theological school, and the Emanuel Swedenborg Library. The Baha'i House of Worship in Wilmette, Illinois, or Chicago Baha'i Temple, is a Baha'i temple. It is the second Baha'i house of worship ever constructed and the oldest one still standing. It is one of 8 continental temples, constructed to serve all of North America. The temple was designed by French-Canadian architect Louis Bourgeois, 1856–1930, who received design feedback from Abdul el-Baha during a visit to Haifa in 1920. To convey the Baha'i principle of the unity of religion, Bourgeois incorporated a variety of religious architecture and symbols. Although Abdul el-Baha participated in a groundbreaking ceremony in 1912 that laid a cornerstone, construction began in earnest in the early 1920s and was delayed significantly through the Great Depression and World War II. Construction picked up again in 1947, and the temple was dedicated in a ceremony in 1953. Baha'i houses of worship are intended to include several social, humanitarian, and educational institutions clustered around the temple, although none have been built to such an extent. The temples are not intended as a local meeting place, but are instead open to the public and used as a devotional space for people of any faith. The Alamo is a historic Spanish mission and fortress compound founded in the 18th century by Roman Catholic missionaries in what is now San Antonio, Texas, United States. It was the site of the Battle of the Alamo in 1836, a pivotal event of the Texas Revolution in which American folk heroes James Bowie and Davy Crockett died. Today it is a museum in the Alamo Plaza Historic District and a part of the San Antonio Mission's World Heritage Site. Originally named the Misión San Antonio de Valero, it was one of the early Spanish missions in Texas, built for the education of local American Indians after their conversion to Christianity. The mission was secularized in 1793 and then abandoned. 10 years later, it became a fortress housing the 2nd Flying Company of San Carlos de Paris military unit, who likely gave the mission the name Alamo. During the Texas Revolution, Mexican General Martín Perfecto de Cas surrendered the fort to the Texian army in December 1835, following the siege of Béjar. A relatively small number of Texian soldiers then occupied the compound for several months. The defenders were wiped out at the Battle of the Alamo on March 6, 1836. As the Mexican army retreated from Texas several months later, they tore down many of the Alamo walls and burned some of the buildings. For the next 5 years, the Alamo was periodically used to garrison soldiers, both Texian and Mexican, but was ultimately abandoned. In 1849, several years after Texas was annexed to the United States, the U.S. Army began renting the facility for use as a quartermaster's depot, before again abandoning the mission in 1876 after nearby Fort Sam Houston was established. The Alamo Chapel was sold to the state of Texas, which conducted occasional tours but made no effort to restore it. The remaining buildings were sold to a mercantile company that operated them as a wholesale grocery store. The Daughters of the Republic of Texas, DRT, formed in 1891 and began trying to preserve the Alamo. Adina Emilia de Zavala and Clara Driscoll successfully convinced the state legislature in 1905 to purchase the remaining buildings and to name the DRT as the permanent custodian of the site. Over the next century, periodic attempts were made to transfer control of the Alamo from the DRT. In early 2015, Texas Land Commissioner George P. Bush officially moved control of the Alamo to the Texas General Land Office. The Alamo and the 4 missions in the San Antonio Mission's National Historical Park were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site on July 5, 2015. The Basilica Sagrada Familia is an unfinished church in the Eixample district of Barcelona, Catalonia, Spain. It is the largest unfinished Catholic church in the world. Designed by the Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí, 1852–1926, his work on Sagrada Familia is part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. On November 7, 2010, Pope Benedict XVI consecrated the church and proclaimed it a minor basilica. On March 19, 1882, construction of the Sagrada Familia began under architect Francisco de Paula del Villar. In 1883, when Villar resigned, Gaudí took over as chief architect, transforming the project with his architectural and engineering style, combining Gothic and curvilinear Art Nouveau forms. Gaudí devoted the remainder of his life to the project, and he is buried in the church's crypt. At the time of his death in 1926, less than a quarter of the project was complete. Relying solely on private donations, the Sagrada Familia's construction progressed slowly and was interrupted by the Spanish Civil War. In July 1936, anarchists from the FAI set fire to the crypt and broke their way into the workshop, partially destroying Gaudí's original plans, drawings, and plaster models, which led to 16 years of work to piece together the fragments of the master model. Construction resumed to intermittent progress in the 1950s. Advancements in technologies such as computer-aided design and computerized numerical control (CNC) have since enabled faster progress in construction past the midpoint in 2010. However, some of the project's greatest challenges remain, including the construction of 10 more spires, each symbolizing an important biblical figure in the New Testament. It was anticipated that the building would be completed by 2026, the centenary of Gaudí's death, but this has now been delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The basilica has a long history of splitting opinion among the residents of Barcelona over the initial possibility it might compete with Barcelona's cathedral, over Gaudí's design itself, over the possibility that work after Gaudí's death disregarded his design, 15, and the 2007 proposal to build a tunnel nearby as part of Spain's high-speed rail link to France, possibly disturbing its stability. Describing the Sagrada Familia, art critic Rainer Zerbst said it is probably impossible to find a church building anything like it in the entire history of art, and Paul Goldberger describes it as the most extraordinary personal interpretation of Gothic architecture since the Middle Ages. The basilica is not the cathedral church of the Archdiocese of Barcelona, as that title belongs to the Cathedral of the Holy Cross and St. Eulalia, Barcelona Cathedral. St. Peter's Church, Swedish, Sankt Petri Kyrka, is a brick Gothic church in Malmö, Sweden. Built in the 14th century as the main church of the city, it has been described as the main Gothic monument within church architecture in Skåne. The church was a spiritual center during the Reformation, and was one of only a few churches in what was at the time medieval Denmark that suffered damage due to iconoclasm as a consequence of the Reformation. St. Peter's Church contains late medieval murals of recognized high quality, as well as a number of unusual furnishings. The altarpiece, made in 1611, is one of the largest in the Nordic countries. Notre Dame de Paris is a medieval Catholic cathedral on the Île de la Cité, an island in the Seine River, in the 4th arrondissement of Paris. The cathedral, dedicated to the Virgin Mary, is considered one of the finest examples of French Gothic architecture. Several of its attributes set it apart from the earlier Romanesque style, particularly its pioneering use of the rib vault and flying buttress, its enormous and colorful rose windows, and the naturalism and abundance of its sculptural decoration. 5. Notre Dame also stands out for its musical components, notably its 3 pipe organs, one of which is historic, and its immense church bells. Construction of the cathedral began in 1163 under Bishop Maurice de Sully and was largely completed by 1260, though it was modified frequently in the centuries that followed. In the 1790s, during the French Revolution, Notre Dame suffered extensive desecration, much of its religious imagery was damaged or destroyed. In the 19th century, the coronation of Napoleon I and the funerals of many of the French Republic's presidents took place at the cathedral. The 1831 publication of Victor Hugo's novel Notre Dame de Paris, known in English as The Hunchback of Notre Dame, inspired popular interest in the cathedral, which led to a major restoration project between 1844 and 1864, supervised by Eugene Viollet-le-Duc. On August 26, 1944, the liberation of Paris from German occupation was celebrated in Notre Dame with the singing of the Magnificat. Beginning in 1963, the cathedral's facade was cleaned of centuries of soot and grime. Another cleaning and restoration project was carried out between 1991 and 2000. The cathedral is one of the most widely recognized symbols of the city of Paris and the French nation. In 1805, it was awarded the honorary status of a minor basilica. As the cathedral of the Archdiocese of Paris, Notre Dame contains the cathedra of the Archbishop of Paris. In the early 21st century, approximately 12 million people visited Notre Dame annually, making it the most visited monument in Paris. The cathedral has long been renowned for its Lent sermons, a tradition founded in the 1830s by the Dominican Jean-Baptiste Henri Lacordaire. In recent years, these sermons have increasingly often been given by leading public figures or government-employed academics. Over time, the cathedral has gradually been stripped of many of its original decorations and artworks. However, the cathedral still contains several noteworthy examples of Gothic, Baroque, and 19th century sculptures, a number of 17th and early 18th century altarpieces, and some of the most important relics in Christendom, including the crown of thorns, a sliver of the true cross, and a nail from the true cross. On April 15, 2019, while Notre Dame was undergoing renovation and restoration, its roof caught fire and burned for about 15 hours. The cathedral sustained serious damage as a result. The timber spirelet over the crossing, was destroyed, as was most of the lead-covered wooden roof above the stone-vaulted ceiling. This resulted in contamination of the site and the nearby environment with lead. After the fire, many of the proposals for restoration suggested modernizing the cathedral's design, but the French National Assembly rejected this approach, enacting a law on July 29, 2019 that required the restoration to preserve the cathedral's historic, artistic, and architectural interest. The task of stabilizing the building against possible collapse was completed in November 2020, and reconstruction began in 2021. The government of France has said it hopes the reconstruction can be completed by spring 2024, in time for the opening of the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris. 13. President Emmanuel Macron confirmed on April 14, 2021 that the cathedral site will be formally returned to the church on April 15, 2024, and that the first Mass since the fire will be held in the cathedral nave on that day, even if the reconstruction has not been finished by then. Marseille Cathedral is a Roman Catholic cathedral and a national monument of France, located in Marseille. It has been a basilica minor since 1896. It is the seat of the Archdiocese of Marseille, formerly the Diocese of Marseille until its elevation in 1948. St. George's Basilica is the oldest surviving church building within Prague Castle, Prague, Czech Republic. The basilica was founded by Vratislaus I of Bohemia in 920. It is dedicated to St. George. Primarily Romanesque in style, it is part of the collection of buildings that comprise the castle, the political capital of the nation, and the spiritual center of the Czech state. Consecrated in 921, the basilica is one of the oldest churches in Prague built in the Romanesque style. The construction of the church was begun by Vratislaus I. At the time of Vratislaus' death in 921, the church had been completed but not consecrated. Wenceslaus I completed the project, and upon her death he buried his grandmother, Ludmila of Bohemia there. Istanbul is famous for its mosques. As the capital of the Ottoman Empire since 1453 and the largest city in Turkey, Istanbul is home to over 3,000 mosques. This makes it overwhelming to decide which ones to visit, but here are 7 of the most important mosques in Istanbul you should see based on their architectural character and historical context. 1. Sultanahmet, the Blue Mosque. This 17th century mosque, facing Hagia Sophia, is famous for its beautiful blue tile work ornamenting its interior walls. Its 6 slim minarets distinguish it from other mosques, which normally have 2 or 4 minarets. It was built from 1609 to 1616, during the rule of Ahmed I. Like many other mosques, it also houses the tomb of the founder, a madrasa and a hospice. While still used as a mosque, Sultanahmet is one of the most popular and important tourist attractions in Istanbul. Sultanahmet is considered to be the last great mosque of the Ottoman classical period, as it is the culmination of 2 centuries of both Ottoman mosque and Byzantine church development. It incorporates some Byzantine elements of Hagia Sophia along with traditional Islamic architecture. 2. Süleymanî, the Magnificent. The Süleymanî Mosque is the second largest mosque in Istanbul, and one of the best-known sites not only in Istanbul, but all of Turkey. This outstanding mosque was built in the 16th century by the famous Ottoman architect Mimar Sinan for Sultan Süleyman the Magnificent. It combines tall, slender minarets, typical of Ottoman architecture, with large domed buildings supported by half-domes in the style of the Byzantine church Hagia Sophia, which the Ottomans converted into the Mosque of Hagia Sophia. The design also plays on Suleiman's second Solomon ego, as it references the Dome of the Rock, which was built on the site of the Temple of Solomon. The courtyard is of exceptional grandeur with a colonnaded peristyle. The tombs of the Sultan, his wife Hürrem, and Mimar Sinan are found within its compounds. It is the largest mosque in Istanbul with 4 minarets, but not the largest overall. 3. Yeni Cami, New Mosque. This mosque was ordered by Safavi Sultan, who was the wife of Sultan Murad III. Construction began in 1597, but due to political troubles construction stopped halfway. The partially constructed structure fell into ruins and was largely destroyed by a fire in 1660. Later that year, the imperial architect Mustafa Aga suggested that Veli Turhan Hadis, mother of Sultan Mehmet IV, should complete the project as a work of piety. The mosque was finally finished in 1663. Today it is one of the most well-known mosques in Istanbul. The interior of the mosque has excellent examples of Ottoman tile work, known as Iznik tiles, blue tiles that bear the name of the town from where they are made, but the best samples of Iznik tiles can be seen in Rustam Pasha. 4. Rustam Pasha. Rustam Pasha is a mosque commissioned by a businessman, Grand Vizier, minister of Suleiman's court, and military man bearing that same name, who spent his wealth raising public buildings, mosques, and charitable foundations. It was built between 1561 and 1563, and it contains the best samples of Iznik tiles in all Istanbul. Iznik tiles are a distinctive signature of Ottoman decoration, which have a strong relationship with the politics, propaganda, and empire building of the period in Ottoman history. 5. Seytsad Mosque. The Seytsad Mosque, or Prince's Mosque, was commissioned by Sultan Suleiman I in memory of his eldest son by Hürrem, Prince Mehmet, who died of smallpox at the age of 21 in 1543. It was the first major commission by the imperial architect Mimar Sinan, which was completed in 1548. It is considered by architectural historians as Sinan's first masterpiece of classical Ottoman architecture. Being the first major building by Sinan, you can still see he is developing his design techniques, like the columns being heavy, for fear of structural integrity. Unlike the typical austere decoration of most mosques, this one is highly decorated with very elaborate patterns. For example, the 2 minarets have elaborate geometric sculptures in low bas-relief and occasional terracotta inlays. 6. Hagia Sophia. Hagia Sophia, famous in particular for its massive dome, is considered the epitome of Byzantine architecture and is said to have changed the history of architecture. While it was built in 360 as the Greek Patriarchal Cathedral of Constantinople, in 1453, it was converted into a mosque. That is until 1931, when it was secularized and turned into a museum. It was the largest cathedral in the world for nearly 1,000 years. The current building, third one to occupy the site, was originally built as a church around 532 on the orders of Emperor Justinian. It was designed by the Greek scientists Isidore of Miletus, a physicist, and Anthemius of Tralles, a mathematician. Of great artistic value is its decorated interior with beautiful mosaics and marble pillars. At one point the temple itself was so richly and artistically decorated that Justinian proclaimed, "Solomon, I have outdone thee." 7. Ayap. Being the first mosque built after the conquest of Istanbul, the Great Mosque of Ayap lies outside the city walls in Ayap district. It is located near the Golden Horn, at the supposed place where Ayap, the standard-bearer of the Prophet Muhammad, died in the Islamic assault on Constantinople in 670. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, who hosted the Prophet Muhammad in his house when he moved from Mecca to Medina, is supposed to be entombed in it.